Cheating Husbands and Coffeehouses. The Woman's Petition Against Coffee and Man's Meager Response by Ricardo Pierre-Louis. There were few places one could escape the oppressive air and politics of 17th century London. That is until the first coffee shop arrived. When the Brits finally learned of the brew, hundreds of years after its discovery in Ethiopia, it quickly drew the ire and attention of conservatives and victors alike. There was widespread fear it would replace alcohol and foment discord among the drunk, uneducated masses. Propaganda campaigns were unleashed to tie the drink to everything foreign, the sweat of Negroes, the blood of Moors, and unchristian, i.e., bitter Mohammedan gruel. And while these racist campaigns were as ineffective as they were unoriginal, there is one that stood out against the rest: the Women's Petition Against Coffee. Unlike the homogeneous chains we've come to know, the coffee shops of the time varied widely in intent and theme. Rainbow Coffee House became a refuge for Freemasons and French refugees. Jonathan's Coffee House, found in an exchange alley, was frequented by merchants and businessmen and became the home of the London Stock Exchange. Others became the birthplace of life insurance or assassination plots. The congregation of the masses was and always has been seen as a threat to thin-skinned rulers. So even though these coffee shops did little to combat the conservative norms, patrons were still largely white men, they were still perceived as an affront to polite society. They were the college campuses of the time, deeply unequal institutions that were believed to foster radical thought, and just like college campuses, they became the prime target of conservative forces. In 1674, the Women's Petition Against Coffee, penned by a well-wisher, started to make the rounds. In addition to its fantastical takedowns of the male anatomy, the petition is filled with all sorts of jabs aimed at coffee-drinking men. Coffee houses sometimes doubled as brothels, or at least helped encourage certain kinds of matchmaking activities. If a man came home after a late night and smelled like coffee, it was hardly different than him having lipstick on his lapel. So the theory goes that the author of this letter was the wife of an unfaithful man, a woman who took issue with the infidelity of the male species and needed to let the world know. She attacks their trousers and says, "They come from it with nothing moist but their snotty noses, nothing stiff but their joints, nor standing but their ears." She talks about how annoying it makes a man. For besides, we have reason to apprehend and grow jealous that men, by frequenting these Stygian tap houses, will usurp on our prerogative of tattling, and soon learn to exceed us in talkativeness, a quality wherein our sexes ever claimed preeminence. And finally, she even takes aim at the brew itself. Men spend their money all for a little base, black, thick, nasty, bitter, stinking, nauseous puddle water. Although there was likely little disagreement on our last point, British coffee was known for being an abhorrent yet suitable alternative to alcohol or the fetid water flowing through the tap. Still, the author must have hit a nerve, because shortly thereafter, a man's answer to this petition was released. The reactionary piece leans heavily on an acerbic, self-righteous type of prose, written by exactly the kind of man the well-wisher warned us of, talkative with nothing to say. Yet, as entertaining as these caustic missives are, there's another theory that perhaps the petition and its resulting discourse serves an ulterior motive. In 1675, 1 year after the Women's Petition Against Coffee was written, King Charles II tried to ban coffee through an edict. It then appears to be too much of a coincidence that the will of the king, a man with nearly a dozen mistresses, aligns with that of this fed-up housewife. In his book, Elite Capture, the philosopher Olufemi Otaiwo writes about how identity politics has become weaponized to serve a select few. Elites have learned that rather than fight progressive politics, it's far easier to incorporate them and water them down to diminish their value. One can only speculate, but I believe that the Women's Petition Against Coffee is an early attempt at elite capture. While it began as an honest list of objections to the patriarchal culture of coffee houses, it gained infamy perhaps through the support of the crown and other elite forces that are less interested in equality and more interested in the squashing of dissent.